Hello. So I'm wanting to just give you a little introduction to Elaine Lilley's conversation that I had today. And I wanted to just let you know that one of the things that I'm interested in is different modes of healing and different ways that people get their healing. A lot of people who don't go to therapy find different ways of getting grounded and getting support and perspective. So Elaine Lilley talked about some of those ways that she has taught people and taught herself, how she has really identified some of her own intuition, where it came from, developing it more, and giving people the tools that they need to actually check in with themselves on the daily basis. And then she provides a different perspective because she's able to have her highly developed intuition give them more information than they can access themselves. What I love about our conversation was that I'm a West Coast mentality person, from and living on the East Coast some of the time now. And so I like to bridge this gap between um, some of the ways that I've learned about these things on the West Coast and my psychology background, and how some of these things apply in different ways. So we all listen to different forms of healing and different forms of gaining insight from people. And I wonder if this talk could help you really think about some of the ways that you do it and some of the ways that you might want to hone in a little bit more. Some of what we talked about was having a practice, an intentional practice that you check in with yourself on the daily, really find out what's there, what you need to listen to, what your intuition is telling you. And then also use different tools like journaling, the pause, pulling a card from either a tarot deck or an oracle card, which gives you a message that helps you figure out, okay, what do I want to pay attention to? And how do I interpret in my own mind what that means for me? And that's quite powerful because no one's telling you to interpret things a certain way, is giving you a message. And maybe that also is something that you start seeing out in the universe. Like somebody keeps asking or telling you this one thing, and you keep hearing people talk about it. That's sometimes the way we get messages about insight and change and honing into ourselves. What was some of the other things that she said? I liked when she talked about an unresolved problem, and before you go to bed is to meditate on that and to write it down and see what answers your unconscious mind gives you. Um, I love the idea of the environment and the ley lines, and how the environment, there's different parts of the world and our even our neighborhoods that feel so nice when we walk past them, and we just feel like, oh, we can exhale, oh, we can have a new energy, we can have a shift in our energy. And all of this is just ways to connect with being more present where you are and how you're noticing that and noticing yourself and noticing the world around you. So, always good to have insight from different kinds of philosophies and ways of focusing on healing. I hope you enjoy our talk. So, Elaine, I'm so happy to talk to you today because I wanted to see if we could explore the subject of and the topic of intuition. So, I wonder if you could like just bring me into how you think about it, how you think about intuition, and how you got to be aware of this in yourself.
Okay, well, thank you for having me. Very, very excited to be here. Um, Intuition to me, we all have intuition. We all have it's instinctual. Um, Intuition is, I tell people time and time again, I'll get a hit. I call it getting a hit. Like take an umbrella. And I'm like, yeah, but it's not raining. And then I don't take it. And then it starts raining later. I'm like, okay. I've really it developed, I think, from when I was a teenager. My father was he was an engineer, but he was also a dowser. For those people listening in, may not know what that is, but my father would douse for water, and I think also there's some of this on my mother's side as well. So I started listening to myself, and I got really interested in a multitude of topics, and I just started really following my own instinct. And I really encourage people to listen to themselves because it's
Mhm.
in there, but they're not always paying attention.
Mhm.
Um, So what a dowser is someone who, my father was old school, so he used an apple tree branch and it would look like a Y. And so he taught himself, really read a book. And if you had met my dad, he went to up here in Maine, he went to Maine Maritime, he graduated 4.0. I mean, he was very, very book smart. My father was just, you would never think, what is dad doing with a dowsing rod? So he's like, hey, come with me. So we're out in the yard and the stick, the pointed end goes this way. And so I'd be on one end, he'd be on the other. And as you walk on ley lines, Ley, ley lines on the earth plane, that the stick will automatically start going down to the point where I couldn't stop it. And he was not pulling it. I could tell the difference. It was being somehow pulled. So he found the well on my brother's land when he first bought his house, and they dug and there it was. So it's, my dad had that, that instinctive nature. Also growing up by the ocean, weather was a big deal for me, and paying attention to weather, the clouds, just what's it looking like across the sky. He was in the Navy, and we all just, we went to the beach, we just followed nature, really. My
Well, I
mom,
like that idea about like just paying attention to your environment, paying attention to that hit that you have inside yourself. Like that's
yeah,
a lot of what the intuition is, the way that you sort of met your own intuition is by just really getting committed to that. And it sounds like it was in your family. It was an awareness in your family that they had it, that they did it, that you sort of you caught on to that, that was part of how people in your family talked and use that as a resource.
for sure. Yeah. It's not like we didn't talk about it all the time because I grew up Catholic and French, and we just didn't discuss that. Sometimes it's just being raised Catholic. That's like you go to church and they're like, oh, no, 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 we don't discuss that. So you would make it out to be not, we call it woo woo. You hear a lot of people saying, oh, I'm going to talk a little woo woo now. So I guess as I progressed and got into everything, I just really just started, paying attention. And I would listen to my instinct, my gut. When I would give readings, I have a knowing, and everyone has a different place in the body where it resonates. And for me, it's in the chest area. Some people get it in the gut, the real gut, get that too. But when I'm giving a reading, I can feel the difference when I can feel someone coming in. And when someone asks me a question, and then that's where it kind of comes from. So, but growing up, I just was always intrigued by astrology and cards and that kind of thing.
So going back to a few things, you talked about ley lines and you also talked about reading. So I want to make sure that people are following us and what that means, and that you also grew up in a conservative background. So this wasn't something that was like readily acceptable. There was almost like, okay, now we're going to talk woo woo. Now we're going to talk like that. But normally this is our orientation is sort of the dominant culture of being conservative or something like that. Right. But talk
Yeah.
about ley lines so that people understand what that means.
Well, I mean, the little I
Maybe the
know is,
definition, like,
yeah. So, energy lines of the earth. That's how I have a shamanic background as well. I mean, when you get into this world, you tend to have a lot of tools in your bag. We say, okay, I got a giant tool bag and I've learned a lot. So when am I going to pull this out? So when I took a 2-year apprenticeship in shamanism, we learned about ley lines, because when you want to set up your mesa, or you set up to sit outside and to get certain energies, if you imagine like a grid, like in the city, how all the streets run like this, it's the same way with the earth. There are lines underneath. There are different, like when people go to different areas, I believe there's a 4-way out west, 4 states come together and people claim,
yes.
what I'm talking about.
Uh-huh.
That's kind of like what I'm describing
Yeah.
with the lines. So I
Yeah, and
believe,
I've heard it sort of said as sometimes ley lines, you might not even know that you're really connecting to that idea, right? Because it's like how you connect to the ideas of these concepts. But it's if you can think about those places on the earth or places in your life that you long to go back to, like you get a lot out of going there, like from the environment. Like I have my favorite spots that I feel like nature feeds me in a certain way when I go there, but I also know it feels good to be there. So I always think about that as more of a ley line concept, like it's a positive there's a positive energy coming from that space. So,
Exactly. Yeah.
mhm,
Well, vibration. I mean, everything's energy, right? Everything's vibration. So, um, it's kind of like when you walk into a room and let's say you go to a party and you walk in and you see someone and you meet them and you're like, automatically, you just go, no, I'm not feeling the vibe here. Or, wow, I really feel this energy here.
mhm, mhm.
So there's a lot of that right now. 3D, 5D, people are talking about that, about how we're shifting. And I believe that, especially now with the phones and everything we're bombarded with, if we could put that down for 5 minutes, really go inside yourself or in your body and go, how does this feel to me? How does it feel?
Mhm.
Um, and I really encourage people with that when I give readings
Yeah.
too.
Right. So, so part of what I was hoping when I started to have this theme with this podcast interview series that I'm doing is to talk to people that do different kinds of healing and talk to people who actually see different kinds of clients in different ways, because I think healing comes in all different ways for people, not just one way. Um, and so that's when I bumped into thinking about talking with you. I thought you have a different way that you work with people, and I want people just to hear that. Maybe people know all these things who are listening, but this is just different concepts, ideas, ways to connect with yourself. So remember, when you hear some of the things you don't know about, you listen and you take what works for you, and then you leave the rest. You don't, not all of therapy, not all of meditation, all that stuff. Not everything works for everybody, but there is a lot of different ways to approach healing. And so that's one of the things I'm hoping to expose people to. So it's good to have you
Awesome.
here talking about some of these things, and in the way that you talk. So I'd love to hear a little bit. I'm sure the audience would, is a little bit about your background. And you told us a little bit about how you're coming into this, but maybe what you do, what your gift is, what your practice is with people.
Sure. So I want to say it was back in the 90s, I got into tarot cards. And I took a class here in Portland. We're up on the hill, and it was in an old sea captain's house. It just happened to be there. And so the teacher, she was phenomenal, great teacher. There was like 5 of us in the class, and I really resonated with the cards. And I had them pop up in my life, as a teenager. I didn't know what they were. It's different from oracle cards, and people are like, well, what's tarot? I should have probably brought a deck and I could show. um there's meanings with every single card in the tarot deck, and whereas
Hmm.
an oracle card, like if you pull an angel card, it has a message. So with tarot, I really wanted to know, what is this 3 of Cups, the Death card, the Tower card, what does this mean and how do you make it work? So I took the class and I started to give readings, pushed by a friend at the time who was a spiritual teacher, and was like, just, you got to get out there and do it. So I started giving readings, and people were like, yeah, that makes sense. And I was like, okay, I'm really not making this up. That's the other thing that people are like, well, how do I know I'm not making it up? Like, I hear something. You have, there's a knowing, there's a feeling with it. It's not, how do I describe it? There's you just kind of have a sense inside yourself, like, wow, okay, I do know, like when someone's calling and you're like, I think that's, before you see the phone, I think that's, oh wow, look, there's my mother calling, you knew it. So getting back to the cards, so I started giving readings with the cards. I'd go to what people have psychic fairs, and then you'd
Hmm.
set up a table, people come in, you do the cards. So what was happening, I was doing this, but I was also taking other classes. So my psychic gifts were accelerating to the point where the cards were getting in the way, because then I was communicating with people who had crossed. And before I knew it, I was having like Aunt Joy pop in, and I'm having this person, and I see this in my mind's eye. All readers are different. I see people, I point here, my third eye, I see in my mind's eye. And so I'd say, is it okay if I say to you, I think I'm getting this woman, she looks about this, this height, this hair, does that resonate? Yeah, yeah, okay. She's on your mother's side, she's telling me, and then she's holding a plate with roses on it. What does that mean? Oh my God, that was my wedding china. Da 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 da. She was at my wedding and she passed away. I'm like, great, I'm in. I go, because once they start talking with you, like you get their energy, um, then you can keep going with the reading, if that makes
Uh-huh.
sense.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Um, the other thing for me is when I give a reading, I tell people I take it very seriously because I have had people, they're like, yeah, prove it. They'll come in front of me. I'm like, I'm not a circus act. Okay. This is something that I really, I have a lot of respect for. And I don't play with this. And so some people, you can just tell that a reading's not going to go anywhere because they're blocking you. That's the other part. I say, if we're going to have a reading, be open. You know, you really are coming because you're like, I really do want to hear from so and so.
Mhm.
And not everybody wants to talk who have crossed. Sometimes they'll just be like, I'm not, I don't want to talk to them for whatever reason. And so that's how it kind of went. I used as a tool. Again, I have a lot of tools in my bag. The cards were a tool.
Mhm.
Didn't need them as much. I still use them because they're spot on. Tarot cards are spot on. Oracle cards are spot on. It's your higher self that's coming through. And
Mhm.
that's what I also try to encourage people, not try. I do. I say, that's your higher self. That's your inner wisdom. You're
Right.
just not hearing it.
So it's back to that paying attention and then maybe adding to it like listening to yourself. Like really the deep listening. And these tools help initiate this connection to the deep listening. Because if it wasn't right, like if you know you read a card or made a connection and it didn't follow, then the person would be like, oh no, that doesn't quite fit for me. But there might be something else in the reading that did. So it's that's also and also the interpretation of the message is someone's personal interpretation, right?
Right. I mean, it's well, that's what I mean. I'm getting what I'm getting. And
Right.
I'm saying, if I'm reading you and I said, Susan, I have a man here. Did your brother pass away? Yes, he did. Okay, well, this is who. All right. So he's telling me this, this, and this. And you're like, well, yeah, that makes sense, but not everything fits. You know, sometimes you're on, sometimes you're not. And then what I tell people, and when I open space, sacred space before reading, I ask for the highest of the high and what that person needs to hear at that time,
Mhm.
because you don't want to flood someone with a bunch of information, because some people are like,
Right.
I don't want to know about. I'm like, I'm not gonna get that information because it's not going to serve you. And my goal, so to speak, when I give a reading is to have the person walk away better than when they sat down or when we started talking, because they're vulnerable, they're taking a risk, you know, whether you are like, hey, my boyfriend, are we going to get married? You know, I get a lot, you know, a lot of those questions, but
Yes, the yes or no questions, right? The yes or
yeah, now, yeah. And that's even with Dex, yes and no. Yeah. You know, it is always about the question too. I'm sure, you know, with, you know, in your line of work, it's like, well, you're not really asking me a question that's going to propel you into where you want to go.
Mhm.
That's also part of what I
Yeah,
gently
so why are you asking the question? And sometimes what you look at first is like, why is this important to you? What is it that you want to really hear? Or I would be so disappointed if I heard that. I want this to really happen for me in my life or whatever that might be.
right. And you know, again, if we're talking about healing, that I want the person to, the goal is to, again, walk away with something they can use
Yeah.
and move
I've
on
been
from there.
recently thinking about this concept, and I think you started to talk about it. So I want to explore it a little bit more of the healer and the person that's coming to the healer. And that could be like, even if you go to a doctor, right? Even if you go to whatever it is that's your healing thing, your acupuncturist or something. And it's almost like being the healer person is putting themselves in a space of being receptive to you and also to receptive in respecting of you, like what is going to be helpful to you. Um, and then the person that's coming for the healing, whether even if it's a medical doctor again, is like being open to like this person is I'm asking this person to give me something, resource, energy, information, and being open to it. So if I think it's kind of amazing that a lot of times people come and don't want to do their part of the work in that connection because it is an
Mhm.
exchange. Um,
Mhm.
and, you know, we get sloppy in life, right? We're like running in, just tell me, running into our acupuncturist, just fix me, um,
Yep.
give me something that's going to make me feel better in therapy. I don't want to have these problems that I have, those kinds of things. But there is this exchange that happens. And that whoever's the healer and whatever their modality is, they're putting themselves in a space of receptivity to, you know, spirituality, higher guides, their intuition. You said, what did you call it? You said open space, sacred space.
Mhm.
Um, and just tell me what you mean by sacred space.
Sacred
Let
space
people know.
is,
Yeah.
yeah, so sacred space is, even if it's on a call, even if it's like this, I will take the time to get the person to, let's close your eyes, leave out, whatever. If it's at the end of the day, we just forget it. You can pick it back up after the reading. Let's just forget about it. So we close our eyes, take a couple deep breaths, then I'll say
We'll
a
do it.
prayer.
We'll do it now. So for real, so that
Oh,
I can
sure.
experience
You
it.
want to,
Yeah.
okay. All right.
Yeah.
So you're coming to me. So I'd like you to just shut your eyes, put your shoulders back, be here now, feet on the floor. Nothing else matters. You don't need to be anywhere. There's no rush. Just take a deep breath in, blow it out your mouth. I'm going to say a small prayer. We should have open space on this, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I call in Archangel Michael to surround and protect both of our spaces during this time together. I ask that the highest of the high be present during this conversation. I ask our guides and angels and ancestors who'd like to be known, if they have information they'd like to share, to please make themselves known, bring your information in. I ask that we are surrounded with love and light. So be it, so it is.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Very simple.
Yes, and I just think it sort of reminds me of like if we did everything, even this conversation, like let's say we're doing it now and we started this way, we just had it in our heads in a different way, that we're doing this with like intention, right?
Yep.
That everything, the reason why you come together and have conversations and take the energy to do that is because something is important to talk about. And in conversation, like any energy exchange that you do normally, like if you're really intentional about it, you want to get something out of it. You want to give something to that person, right?
Yep.
Um, and so, I just think it's interesting how it feels like sometimes in life, either when people come to see me to do some healing work or I go to do some healing work, that is the piece that's forgotten. So I really like that you do that at the beginning. I know in my practice, when I work clinically with people, I like sit and think about the person for a minute or two before they walk in the door or the virtual door. Or even why people are coming to see me, what they want to talk about. I just try to get, like what you said, is like a hit on that so that
Yeah.
I'm kind of prepared in my mind to explore that with them. But I just want the people that are listening to also hear that don't miss that moment of like setting some intention for yourself in the things that you're trying to seek. And
Mhm.
just like I think the healer takes a minute just to make sure that they're in the right headspace and receptivity to the person that's in front of them, to give them something, right? It's an energy exchange. So I'm glad we did that.
Good. No, that I know. I wish we had. I wish we had done that in the beginning. I always like to do
Well, we
that.
did it now. It's never too late, right? We
No,
got into
no.
it. Yeah,
As
we got
Oprah says, it's always about the intention. Even when whenever she'd have a meeting, she's like, okay, what's the intention? Why do we want to have Brad Pitt on the show? Like I remember hearing that in
yeah.
some podcast, and I'm like, do you really need a reason? No.
Right, right. I recently
Brad
had
Pitt.
a conversation with an old friend, and when they got on the phone, they said, okay, so what are we talking about today? What are the things that we should be talking about? And so we kind of both said things that we wanted to have discussion about with each other, which I thought was a really great way to start the conversation because a lot of times people aren't that direct around. We're actually talking for a reason. We're not just like blah, blah, blah. Like I called you for a reason, you called me for a reason. And so
I like
let's get
that.
to that, like and say it out loud. Maybe we also check in and how's it going and what's up and all that stuff. But there is usually an intention. And I think it just reminds me to be more forward with the intention of why you're wanting to have an exchange with someone, whether they're your friend or your healer or you're the healer.
I think that's great. I'm going to actually borrow that. I like that at the beginning of because it's true. And right now, actually, I'm studying with UVM online. I'm doing the Death Doula
Uh-huh.
course,
Uh-huh.
and one of the acronyms is WAIT. Why am I talking?
Oh.
Because when you're sitting with someone who's getting ready to cross, we always are like, "Uh-oh, we're not talking." Like, what am I supposed to do? Fill the space? Like, should it? And it's like, no, no. I realized that too. My mother-in-law passed at the end of June, and I we took turns and I sat with her, and, she's just laying there and just quietly, she's, not actively, she wasn't in the active process at that point, but I didn't fill the space. So I think that the intention of, it's a good thing to ask, like, why am I talking? But I love that about setting the tone, like, okay, we wanted to get on this call, so let's have some goals.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not all over the place, unless of course it's just that kind of call. But I think, yeah,
Right.
and circling back to the healing modality about, or the healing idea of, okay, if I'm coming to you, let's say for therapy, and I just
Mm-hmm.
come in and sit in the chair,
Mm-hmm.
and you're doing all the work, and I think people forget, like, well, this is, you need to participate,
Right.
and there's that expectation of, well, fix me, I came
Right.
to you. Maybe that's what you were trying, maybe that's where you
Yeah, I
were.
mean, I think it's in reflection of like our hurried society, right? That we're all sort of rushing around, but maybe part of it, and I think this sort of sets a few markers for our call, is that we started out talking about what is intuition and how do you know? It's like paying attention, it's listening deeply to yourself, but we have to sort of slow down and be intentional about that, because that's the space that we're not normally in, because that's sort of how we operate in society. We're rushing, we're driving, we're on our phones, we're texting, oh, let me finish this last text or whatever it is. That stops us from really being present. And I just think there's something about, where does all that come from? Okay, well, it came in your family, you noticed it, you observed it, you got sort of a hit on that, and then you started to develop your own intuition and your own psychic abilities. But they're there to be developed if you want to. But there's also that whole idea about energy, right? That when we go into our space, that we really that makes us feel comfortable. There's an energy exchange going on. We want to come back there, to that special spot, just to regroup, to re-energize, to relax. And there's a reason why, right? And it's no joke. Like, we don't make this stuff up. If we observe the environment and we just hone in on it, we know that this is true. For a lot of people see this way, right? I don't know. Am I kind of summarizing
Yeah,
well?
no, no, you got it. It's reminding me, if I can mention, I listened to a lot of podcasts, and this morning, Mel Robbins, I don't know if you know, she released one this morning, and it was very, very interesting, because it talks about busy. It talks about, and she had some scientific research, or just a therapist who said, why is our society so much, you can't even stand in the grocery line without picking up your phone. And the bigger question, it's kind of like, because it's an addiction. And I love this. And I think he took it from someone else, but it was like, it's not ask about why the addictions, why ask about the pain. So this kind of goes back to, if someone comes to me and they want a reading, and then half the time I obviously, I'll open up, and then I say, okay, you're here. Why? What's up? But I always start with, before you get into that, I want to read, because I check into them as well, like you do. Before someone comes in, I ask for permission. I'm like, can I check in on this person? Yes. So then I'll say, oh, okay. So I'm getting a couple different things. So I'll say, like with you, if you called me, I say, let me just kind of get the energy going. And I'll say, hey, Susan, you know what? This is what I'm getting. You're like, yeah. I've got this going on, this. Okay, great. So you called me. What is it? So then you say, well, I called you because, and then
Right.
I may just ask a couple questions, and half the time the person, just allowing someone the space to hear themselves, you already have the answer in here. You already know. And so many people have forgotten that, which is why they're on the phone. They're looking things up. They're doing this. And I'm like, no, time out. Okay. The wisdom is in here. We have just forgotten how to access it. So if you could take, at the end of the day or in the morning, take a walk, get out in nature, put the phone down, and just stand in the grocery line and just stand there and look around. So many people don't want, and that's when it's like, your guides can't get in. We all have spirit guides. I don't know if you want to, okay, they can be people who have crossed. They can be, typically they're people, they're beings who not necessarily are on the earth plane ever. They are just, they have attached to, people know about guardian angels, at least in my world.
Yeah,
And
that's a
then
simpler way to talk about it. Yeah, the guardian
guardian
angel
angels,
concept. Mhm.
You know, you can't, they say you have it, definitely one, maybe two, you have more than that. So you have a team. You really do. But it's kind of like if you were in a busy room, if you were in the middle of a giant stadium and everybody's talking to each other and you're in the middle of the stadium and you're trying to figure something out, you're not going to hear yourself. It's the same thing. If we don't stop and take the time to just be and sit and stop doing all the time, you know, that whole thing, we're not human doing, we're human being, you'll all of a sudden, right, you're going to get that, oh yeah, that feels right. You know, like you ask yourself the question like, well, what, I'm really thinking about leaving my job. Do I really want to leave the job? Do I want to leave the job? And then you take a walk and you think about it, and all of a sudden then you get this like, you know what, yeah, maybe I do really want to leave this job, and that's okay. And you give yourself permission. You know, there's just so many things I could talk about with this, because I really feel that people just are not listening to themselves. And if we would stop talking all the time, and if we would just sit and listen and find the space, and I'm not talking an hour, people will be like, I don't have time for that. Like, yes, you do. You have to find the time. You do have
Mhm.
time. Um, and I personally, I have a dog, walk the dog in the morning, walk the dog in the afternoon. I will find like in the morning, yeah, I'll start just to wake up. I have my coffee and I'm listening to something, and then I'll turn it off. And then I'm like, okay, what am I getting? What am I getting? And then I'll just kind of just walk, and I'll get, what I need to hear. And then I'll make a recording about it. I don't want to forget it. And then I'll just, okay, what else? What else? You know, and just say, what do you want me to know? What do I need to know? And I will share that that was the intention behind what I made, was that deck that I shared with you.
Mhm.
Um, I made the Oracle deck, the Sea Witch Oracle, only based on my intention was really, I was thinking of the woman, for some reason, Chicago, 10th floor or 25th floor in the city, never been to Maine, had no idea what an Oracle deck was. That was my target. That was my audience. I'm like, I'm going to show you with this deck that you pull a card a day and you get the message you need. And then you're
Mhm.
like,
So do you have your
okay.
cards right there?
No, foolishly, I mean, I can get up and get them, but I don't.
Yeah, get up and get them.
You want me to get up?
I'll just read some of these things on your wall while you're doing it.
Okay, read the big one.
Yes, I'm going to. So, audience, you can read it too. I'll read it out loud. Faith whispers to the warrior, "You cannot understand the storm," and the warrior whispers back, "I am the storm." Huh. We'll have to have her, Elaine, translate that for us, see if it fits. And one of the things I think that's interesting that Elaine is talking about is, and these concepts are talked about in different ways, right? Of how to check in with yourself on the daily. Sometimes people do journaling when they wake up. Sometimes people, I know clients that like set this. I'm just talking about some of the things you've been talking about. Um, that set a clock, an alarm 3 times a day, like stop and check in with themselves and just do a 10-minute meditation, or even just 10 breaths to just like check in, like what's going on, noticing that they can actually modulate their nervous system so they have more access to themselves and their energy, right? Their energy, they might be working on balancing their energy, not like working so hard that they're like falling over at the end of the day, but they're actually
Yeah.
like monitoring their energy. But I wanted to see what does this mean? Faith whispers,
Oh, well,
fate
I'll tell you.
whispers.
So I like to weight lift, and my first trainer, he
Uh-huh.
had this tattooed on his, his arm, his biceps, like out to here. And he's such a giver. He was great. He's a great guy. And I'm like, oh my God, man, that is like awesome. And every time I had it on the other wall, and I was like, no, I need that here. And it's just to say, fate's out there saying, you can't withstand what I'm going to give you. And then you're like, no, I am the freaking storm. You just watch what I can do. That empowers me. That's like, I'm the storm. I'm going to bring it. I have what it takes.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So I don't know. I just like it. It's
Yeah,
just, I don't know.
that's good. I like it too. So
Yeah.
if you were going to do what you do or what you tell people to do around picking a card, that person on the 10th floor of the office building picking a
Yep.
card. So
Sure.
we can make pretend I'll make pretend I'm her. You can pick the card for me. And
Okay.
and let's see like how that is a centering grounding effect, or an intentional effect to my day.
So, the way I do it, and yeah, I'll share it. So what I do in the morning is I have a practice, and that's what I also call is you need a practice. And they're like, well, what the hell is that?
Mhm.
Well, a practice is you can get, this is my deck. It's called See Which Oracle. That's me.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Um,
I like
all
it. It's
these
beautiful.
cards, all these cards, all the pictures I took, and the writing is directly on the card, whereas other decks you have to consult a book. So I thought for the first deck, I'm like, people don't have time. They just want to pull the card, read the message, and then you leave it out so you see it.
Right.
So you can either, you shuffle and you say, okay, what do I need to know today? There's that. The other thing that I had is I have a insert with the deck, and I have some, they're called spreads, nor'easter
Mhm.
spread, lighthouse spread. So each card has
North
the,
nor'easter spread. Okay. So that means
yeah,
you have to pick a certain number of cards.
right. That one is a 5 card spread, and it's about like a nor'easter would be there's a storm coming. But you feel, again, let's go back to energy, right? So
Mhm.
nor'easter spread, card one, what is brewing beneath the surface that I don't know about? How can I weather the storm? Where do I need to tread lightly? And how will spirit show up in my life to assist me during this difficulty?
Oh, okay. I like this this way that you're focusing somebody in their deck pulling. Yes. Good.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean,
Uh-huh.
this, and then the last card is what can I do better after this has passed? So you got something coming at you. That's the thing. No disrespect to man at all, but I'm going to talk about the women. So women get a lot of like, something's off, something's wrong. I don't know what it is, but I
Mhm.
can feel it. You've got that sixth sense, something's off, maybe if you have a child or whatever it is. So with this spread called the nor'easter, those of us who live in New England are like, uh-oh, nor'easter, everyone's at the supermarket, like you're never gonna eat, bread and have milk again. And but that's not, we prepare for that. So with that,
And
I
you
lay
never
it out.
know how bad the storm's going to be, but you can
Yeah,
feel it's coming and you want to be prepared. So
right.
this is kind of
So
like the 5 spread is like something's bubbling up and you don't know what it is, but maybe you're feeling like your relationships are off or something's happening at work or something like that, and you will kind of want to be prepared for it. And
right,
you
because
don't know.
you're picking
Yeah,
up on it. It's
right. And you
energy,
never know
right?
how bad the northeaster is going to be. Sometimes it's nothing.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we like that. And then like this past January, it was a big deal. Um, so all right. So I'm just gonna pull a card. So
Okay.
if I was you, we're just gonna pull a card
Yeah. Well,
and
pull a card for this talk.
perfect. There we go. So what's the overall message for us during this on this call? And I'll pull a card and I just pull wherever. Perspective, viewpoint shift. So that's actually down at a place where I grew up, Biddeford Pool. And it says, is it morning or end of day? All depends on your view. Time to look at something upside down, right side wrong, sideways, no ways, always. Embrace change. Stepping back is also called for now. Give yourself a chance to regroup and reassess. Rushing into anything won't serve you in this instance. How can you see things differently than you have? Taking a walk away temporarily from that decision will help. So, I mean, the way I did the card, is it could be sunrise, maybe sunset, who knows? So the point was perspective. So what I'm getting is that you and I are sharing different viewpoints on the same matter,
Right. Right.
right? It's
Yep.
kind of like what I love with Neil Donald Walsh. He explained in his book Conversations with God. I don't know if you're familiar with, that's like
Mm.
old. He said, like, we can both go to a Red Sox game, both see the home run, but we both are going to share two totally different perspectives.
Mhm.
And that's what I think people forget is that I'm watching the same show, but what I see and my husband sees, he's like, well, I just saw, we love Yellowstone. Well, I just saw Rip do this. And I'll be like, well, I think he said this, so it's the same way in life. And that's
Yeah.
what the card's about.
Uh-huh. Interesting. Yeah. And I also heard the concept of the pause. Like you don't have to act so quickly. You can actually step back and not act really quickly and just allow what happens to happen. And then look at, maybe you don't have to fix, do,
Mm.
rush into something. You could just sit with it for a little bit.
Yeah,
There is
practice
like
the
the
pause.
impulse sometimes to like get through something, right? Just like force the ending,
Yeah,
force a
yeah,
connection, force a confrontation.
Yeah, no, that's not always, that's not always the best way. The other thing I encourage people to do is like, well, I'm kind of, Elaine, I don't really get that. I'm like, well, pull a clarifier. That's what we'd call in tarot.
Okay, so let's pull a clarifier.
Okay, we'll pull a clarifier. Where am I going? Well, play, freedom.
Ah.
Your last unscheduled day off from life was, this might be for you.
Yesterday.
Remember,
Yesterday.
okay. Remember riding your bike, skipping rocks on the water, coloring, playing kick the can as the sun was setting? Yeah, you do. I see that smile. Do what you need at this time. You're allowed. That other thing, it can wait. Here's your permission to put it down. Pick it up tomorrow. You may change your mind just how important that quote thing was after today.
Right. So there's that same theme though, is like the pause, like you don't have to do anything,
Right.
but sort of tend to yourself.
Yep. And I think a lot more, I see people around me that really need to do that. And again, I just go back to this podcast from this morning that I can think of, I mean, everybody, running, running, running. I'm so busy, 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 and why?
Mm-hmm.
Why can't you pause? Why can't you stop? Why can't you just say, no, I'm not going to sign up for another class. No, I'm not going to go and volunteer over here. Because what are you afraid of?
Mm-hmm.
You're going to sit with yourself, and what's going to happen, it's a lot of that. So I think that but the other part too, and if there's what I find, if there's a activity
Mm-hmm.
out in the world or out locally or whatever, you feel that, obviously, you feel like, oh, I can feel, and you're not when you're in the meeting or you're at the event, but you go outside and you're like, wow, what is that? I can feel it. And people may be like, what are you talking about?
Mm-hmm.
The energy. Right? There's energy in everything. So I think that also, the frenetic, that people going with that, like if people, there's also being grounded, ungrounded, feeling that energy. You don't want to really be partake in that. So like, how do I ground myself? How do I put up a boundary? How do I not partake in that? And that all goes back to learning about your energetic body and listening and going, wait a minute, this isn't my stuff. Why am I getting wound up about this? Like, if we've all had this, someone calls, oh my God, you're like, I have this with a close friend of mine. So she'll call and she's on screech. And I'm like, okay, go ahead. And so she'll go. And I'm just holding space.
She's on screech. Is that what you said?
Yeah, she's on
Okay.
screech.
She's
And we
like
have this,
venting. She's venting.
yeah, she's venting. So we have this joke where if you go to locally here, it's the Hannaford supermarket.
Right.
So if you go to Hannaford and you look around the parking lot, look how many people are sitting in their car and they're on the phone. So it's like, who are they talking to? They're venting to someone, or we'll joke, like, I'm in aisle 5. Like, go ahead, let me find, I'll go in the baby food aisle. She'll be like, I have to talk. I'm like, let me get to the baby food aisle, because there's not a lot of people in there all the time. So I'll hide in the baby food aisle, and she starts going off. And so I'm just holding space because she just needs to speak. But I can tell, I'm like, oh my God, you're so ungrounded. Got to get her back down. How do you do that?
Mm-hmm.
So I may be segueing here, but it all kind of, we're all trying to get to the mountain on the top, and we all have different paths.
Right.
What are we choosing?
So let me do a translation. I feel like we're east west, right? So even though I'm from the East Coast, I primarily, my mentality is from the West Coast, right? So
yeah.
So it's interesting to hear all these ways that you even speak, like the screech. And I appreciate it a lot. I appreciate all of the connections that you're making, right? Because they're it's like a different perspective. It's just another way of talking about something. So some of what you said, and it was with the clarifier. I want to go back there with the clarifier. We heard the same message in the second card, right? We heard some of the same messages and then the first card. So it kind of brought it to more of a forefront, like, yes, here's some things to listen to. And you know how that is when you're maybe struggling with something. You talked about it, like, stop, you do have time, take a break, really listen, take a walk. What else is in there that you need to look at? What is like spirit bringing to you? What is your intuition bringing to you? Like, can you take some time to just be with that? Because there's a lot of information in there. I always also think, like, externally, we might hear the same messages over and over again, until we get it. And I don't know if people can resonate to that, but I know some of what you said right now was something that someone was saying to me yesterday, which was like just sitting and being aware of the thoughts and feelings that you have. And sometimes the rush doesn't allow you to have those feelings. Like you don't even have them. You're just like, nope, skipping right past. I'm not going to have those feelings. And then you talked about supporting people and being a person of support. And so one of the ways that you support people, your friend, is you just hold space. You're not like interrupting her, you're letting her have her space, but you're also noticing her energy, like her energy, she's in her head, she's upset. And you're like, sometimes just that focus. And this reminds me of sort of Reiki work, right? Like,
Yeah.
energy work is you just might imagine like, put those feet on the ground. Come on, like bring those feet to the ground.
Yeah.
Try to be a little bit more solid on your feet. So all of the energy that's in your head and making you be explosive, right? And needing
Yeah.
to bend. If you ground yourself, that will be sort of replenished into the earth. So you don't have to feel so out of sorts, right? In this upset that you're having. So you're actually visually kind of energetically doing that for her while you're holding space because you're an intuitive, right? So you're picking up on that. Other people might have, as we all do, like friends or loved ones, or even like the person that's on in the aisle at the supermarket who's having a hard time, who might say something to us and we're like, oh yeah, we hear it. Yeah, got it.
Mhm.
And just holding space. There's nothing we can do about it, but we can just be present to them, to what their suffering is at the moment.
Well, that's the other thing. You don't have to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to remind myself that too a lot.
Mm-hmm.
As healers, we're like, oh, wait, let me, it's like, no, they didn't ask me.
Mm-hmm.
I can be empathetic and sympathetic, but I don't have to fix this. You can care, just don't carry. And I have to remind people of that. You can care, but don't carry it. It's not yours to take. It's
Mm-hmm.
like I had a friend who was always worried about her son. And I was like, you know what? I said, you cannot step in the front, like stop him on his path. In my mind, I see this path and there is. And she's like, no, like I know better than you. And I'm like, no, you don't. Everybody has a path. They're here for a reason. They're here to experience their experiences. We can hold space and listen. That's the other part is I'm learning with the doula work is really, how do we listen? We've forgotten how to listen, because we're always like, well, what am I going to say next? That's it. It's learning to not do that and to be present
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
just try that.
Well, I mean, I think that's an interesting point too, that you said that that acronym of why, I think it was that why wait,
Yep,
especially
yep,
when you were sitting with somebody who's in a dying process, is like, do you want to speak or do you not want to speak? What are you speaking about? Like, this is their time, and how are you trying to fill it up, and why are you trying to fill it up? And then I also think there's that other thought is like, don't be afraid to talk to the dying person about, like, giving them permission to talk about what's happening for them, or fear. Because I
yep,
think a lot of times when people are in a state that they don't want to burden someone in, right, that they
yep,
might not talk. Because so there's just being able to even say those things out loud, like, you can talk, or I can listen, or I don't want to fill up
yep,
the space with things you don't want to hear. So, like, let's be honest with each other about that stuff. If I'm going to be in this really important time with you, and it's a really important position I'm holding for you and for myself, right? It's an honor to be with someone in death and birth. And we all hear of those all the time. Like, there's that inner circle, the people that get to be there for
yep,
both of those occasions, right?
yep. It's well, yeah, death is birth, on a different level.
What do you feel like is the most meaningful part of your work that you've been doing in this spiritual realm for you?
For me. Well, for me, I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't want to help. So to have someone after a reading or coaching, or that they're like, you know what, that makes sense. I really appreciate the fact that I really got something from this. That is what I want to hear.
Mhm.
That and it's not, it's that they really heard themselves, or they got the message they needed to hear from whomever. If it's during a psychic reading, like if someone came through and said, hey, and I do it a little more, that I really want to encourage them. And I'd say, does this make sense? Why does it make sense? What are you getting out of this?
Mhm.
And like, you know what? Yeah, I do understand now. I get what you're trying to tell me. And I knew this all along. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
it's really to have people to end whatever, our time is with a better feeling, like I said, than when they came in. And
Mhm.
also I want them to have an answer to something that they really wanted to know, that they can take further and sit with it and progress, and
Mhm.
to keep going and to
Yeah.
feel hope.
How about in the last 4 years, how do you feel like your work has changed with clients? And then also, what are you doing differently in yourself to access your own intuition?
The last 4 years. Oh, because of COVID, because of all of the
Well,
stuff that went
I mean, I
on,
think the
or
world just changed a lot in the last 4 years.
yeah. Well, I get readings more like, what's my purpose? Why am I here? Why am I here? What am I supposed to be doing? And then we'll talk about kind of like this, like, well, to access, your wisdom. So I get that more than where I get calls like, well, when am I going to meet my husband? And is my boyfriend, there's room for that. But I want the bigger stuff. So I'd say the questions have evolved. Um,
Okay.
as far as for myself, intuitively, it's working. This deck had been a dream of mine way over 5 years ago. So to finally have the time and to feel like I really need to get this out in the world and to have people understand what my intention was,
Yeah.
I'd say that really catapulted me to a level that brought me up, because I really had to dig in order to do this, like with any creative pursuit.
Mhm. Right.
Um,
You really learned a lot, like by doing it, I'm sure, too.
Absolutely. I did. And I also,
Did you
with the,
go into each environment like the ones you were showing us and just sit with it and see what ideas came, or see what thoughts that were strong thoughts intuitively coming in that environment? Is that how you found the cards?
oh, you mean the picture?
Yeah.
Oh, the pictures. The way I did it is I just, even now I'll take a walk. I just take a bunch of photos, and
Uh-huh.
then I uploaded them. And then I would sit down with, okay, what are some of my key phrases? So I wrote those out, and then I'd look at the photo and be like, what does this make me think of? Like, there's a picture I took at a local college here where it was a staircase that actually got washed off by the storm. There's no more staircase, unfortunately. So I'm glad I got a photo of it. So
Yeah.
it's like, it's fear. It's like, okay, here we go. I'm at the top of the staircase, and the way I took it, it looks really, really steep.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So it was more like, take the photo, sit with it. What am I getting? What do I want? Like boundaries. I took a photo in the sand of different, like, you saw paw prints, you saw, footsteps. And I was like, yeah, that's boundaries. That's people crossing each other. Um, so that's kind of how it was. It was organic, I'd say. I put the photos up on the screen and I'd be like, yeah, that's what's speaking to me. And then I would just intuitively write and, of course, tweak it and go through it. But that's basically how I did it.
Mhm.
And so my goal with the deck was to say, but you're also, that's you, that's your higher wisdom. When you pull from any deck, that's really your higher wisdom, like knocking you upside the head. And like you
Right.
said, out in the world, people will like see the same thing and wonder, why do I keep seeing this? Because the universe is trying to get your attention.
Hmm.
That's all that is. And they'll come around and there's your team of guides like, okay, well, she's not getting it this way. So the next thing you're like, well, why am I seeing that? What? Oh, now I'm paying attention. This is weird. Weird. Um,
Yeah.
there's that word. But no, it's just, that's the universe trying to get your attention, but you're not paying attention. So unfortunately, it's like when you pull the tower out of the tarot deck,
Yeah.
there's the death card and the tower card. And the death card is not necessarily literal death. It could be death of an old way, right? The
Right.
tower card, when I taught the class, I did end up teaching tarot. A friend of mine who took it, she said the best example is she woke up that morning, pulled the tower card, ended up in the emergency room with appendicitis. The tower card is like, you're not listening, so we're going to basically slap you across the face or hit you upside the head with something that's so jarring that you
Mhm.
can't do anything but stop and go, okay. Like if you're on a screech, right, and you're not
Yeah.
listening, then all of a sudden, you could just, I don't know, you get sick, you have a fender bender, you,
Hmm.
I don't know, break
Yeah,
your
I
foot.
always think the tower card is like of your own making, right? That you've created that place in the tower too, right? You've created the not listening space.
In your
Mhm.
mind, because traditionally the card shows these two people jumping off and it's a crown. It's like a rattly castle on your head. And so you're right. You are bringing it to that point, and then I've been taught the universe steps in and is kind of like pushes you off at the edge. It's like, okay, you're not going to fall, but you're going to wake up. You better wake up,
Yeah.
because then based on the other cards you pull, then you can go, oh, well, look, here's this. Then the sun comes out. Then you have balance, and then you have this. See, so if you would just.
Mhm. So the other thing that you said, which I just want to, I think this is a good kind of summarizing what we've been talking about, is this idea about practice, that the regularity of being in touch with yourself and being really paying attention to your environment and yourself is a part of gaining this incredible wisdom, right? Self-wisdom, self-knowledge. So it's that daily practice, meeting yourself daily.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I pull a card a day just to get some kind of, yeah, okay, where's my compass going? Sometimes your compass is spinning. So you're like, okay, I need to get to ground zero here. Where's my true north, right? Where's north?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's the daily practice. And I take this is a wonderful, I don't know if you've heard about the artist way.
Yeah.
Okay, the AM pages, right? Three
Yes, the
longhand
morning pages. Yep. Yeah.
writing, 3 pages. I mean, that I have
And also
told
that she does the artist what is it called, walk, the artist state, so you go
the
out in
date.
nature
Yeah.
and find sort of things that pull you together too, right? That
Yeah.
you can pull into, like, what does that all mean to you? What do you
Right, you
notice
take yourself
in the world? Yeah.
somewhere. Yeah,
Mhm.
and that's again giving time for yourself. And if more people
Right.
did that, or if more
Right.
people actually just even journaled, just even wrote down, take a page and get it out of the head, that would help too. I think so. Having a practice every day of something that will bring you joy is really important, I find. And I really encourage people to do that.
Mm-hmm. So how would you end our conversation if you were ending a reading? How would you end it? Would you
Well,
close the space?
oh yeah, we'll have to
Yeah.
close because we opened it, so we're gonna have to
Yes.
close it.
Mhm.
But I would say to you, do you have any other questions, or do you feel like, do you have anything additional that I can help you with? And normally the person's like, no, I'm pretty good. That was great. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
And I do say, hey, I'll say, if you need anything else, just email me. I'm around. And I'm an avid reader, so I'll give some people books and I'll say, here, take that. I always want to leave you with something, like
Mhm.
journaling, a book, a podcast, because people need a tool. So
Right.
why don't you want to close space?
Yeah, that would be great.
All right. So close your eyes, please. Feet on the floor. I'd like to thank all of our guides, angels, and ancestors who are with us today. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I greatly appreciated speaking with Susan and learning about some different techniques and different viewpoints. Thank you, Archangel Michael, for surrounding us with love and light. And I ask that Susan's day continue to be of the light, mine as well. Thank you very much for being with us. So it is, so mote it be.
Mhm. Great.
Thank
I
you.
think that's also, if we're doing a practice, if this is a practice, and one of the things is a reading is a practice too, part of a practice. Can you imagine what it would be like? And I'm kind of asking the people that are listening, is if you open and close your day with an intention, like, there it was. Thanks for the day. I want to, leave this day or end this day with this, like this, reminder to just stay with myself, through the time that I'm sleeping or whatever it is. The
Yeah, no,
continuum.
that's the
Mhm.
thing they say. There's if you're trouble, if you have something, I'll leave you with this. And this is a great practice. If you have something that's bothering you at the end of the day, put it out while you're laying on the pillow before you go to sleep and say, I will have the answer in the morning. I will have clarity. And you
Mhm.
will. Just
Yeah.
it will happen.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. It was really great to hear all these concepts and hear the way you think about them. I was really inspired. So thanks for that.
Thank you. I appreciate the time.